Welcome back to Brighter Rays, and this study is called The Blessing Confirmed. Looking at Genesis 28, 1 through 9. Today we're looking at just 6 through 9 and kind of finishing off looking at this specific text. And I call this Learn About the Filthy Rags, because that's what we need to do. So we come to the end of our passage here, and we see Esau's reaction to everything that's going on, everything that he's witnessed. He's witnessed the blessing of Jacob. He heard the commands of Isaac that he was to go to Paddan-aram and take a wife from there. He also heard his father say that Jacob should not marry a Canaanite woman. Esau also saw that Jacob obeys his father, packed up his goods for the trip, and left. Well, what does Esau do? I mean, Esau could have just ran after him and murdered him, on the way, but he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He stays in the land that he's supposed to be in. And, so what does he do here? Let's first think about Esau's righteousness. Is there righteousness in Esau? Well, first, Esau recognizes that Canaanite women did not please Isaac, his father. He's now just realizing this. He got married when he was 40, so it's been about 30 some years. And maybe close to 40 by this point. And he's had 2 Canaanite wives. And he had children from these 2 Canaanite wives. And we know that those 2 women made the lives of Isaac and Rebekah bitter. Rebekah says that she hated her life because of Esau's wives. So the last, 40 years or something like that, he hasn't figured this out. Come on, man. You're just now figuring this out, Esau? Come on. It's a little too late, don't you think? It's been like 4 decades. And he's now just like, oh, you know what? I didn't realize that my wives made my mom and dad life bitter. Like, how did he not know that? He's unholy, I guess. That's the only thing we can chalk it up to. This guy doesn't care. But now he's like, oh, I didn't realize this. But Esau sees this, and it looks like he tries to make amends, right? He's like, oh, okay, they don't like this. Well, how do I fix this? So he doesn't get rid of his wives. He tries to do what pleases his father, and so he decides to marry an Ishmaelite. Now, what? That's your answer, Esau. You marry a third wife. And, that's already a bad idea. It was a bad idea to marry a second wife, but now you're going to marry a third one? Not a good idea. And sure, you didn't marry a Canaanite, right? You didn't go after one of the Canaanite women. He already has 2 Hittite women. So he doesn't go after a different Canaanite woman. He doesn't marry another Hittite or somebody else, another different tribe, but he marries an Ishmaelite. Do you remember who Ishmael was? The one that mocked your father. The one who was banned from the family. The one who is half the line of Shem and half the line of Ham. Is this really a better choice? I mean, is this really what you're going to do? What makes you think this is going to please your father? Come on, Esau, think about this, man. You're going after an Ishmaelite. This guy, Ishmael, yeah, it's his brother, so it's closer to the family, but remember, Ishmael is half Shem's line, which is the line that Abraham's a part of, and then he's half the line of Ham, which is the cursed line, the one, and so, because he married, because Hagar was from Egypt. That was Ham's descendants. There's a problem there, So he's like, oh, I won't marry a Canaanite, but I'll go marry one of Ham's descendants, one of Ishmael's descendants. Like, come on, man. He's not even trying. Like, why don't you follow your brother and go marry? Anyway, so Esau is trying to, do good, trying to be righteous, but yet in his righteousness, he's doing everything wrong. So, yeah. Now let's talk about our righteousness, though. That's really a question. Our righteousness? Interesting, Esau would try to win his father's favor by doing the good thing. That's what he's trying to do, the good thing, right? It's almost embarrassing when you think about it, but that's exactly what we as humans think when we try to use our righteousness with God. We think that God will see our righteous deeds and just overlook the fact that everything we do is tainted by sin. Isaiah talks about our righteousness like filthy rags or polluted garments. You come before the holy God with a few good deeds next to a mountain of evil and say, God, you must accept me because of these few things. How silly that is. How low a view of God's love do we have if we think we can win His love by doing a few good things? How many hours of Bible study over a lifetime is equal to the love of God? We think, because that's one of the things we think, well, if I just read my Bible, then God will approve, God will be like, oh wow, good job. I'm glad you really did that. Now here is your reward. It's like, how many hours of Bible study equals love of God? How many hours of community service should you do? How much philanthropy is going to equal goodness? How many prayers equals righteousness? Does walking to the front of a church and praying, win the perfect and infinite love of God? Does that one act of walking down an aisle, praying and crying at the front, or whatever else you do down at the front of the church, did that equal the infinite love of God? It's like, oh, well, I'm glad you went down front. I'm glad you cried there. So here's my infinite love. Did that equal? Did that merit God's love? No. Nothing can gain nothing that a human can do can gain the love of God. It's almost, when you stop and think about it, it's almost ridiculous that people think that way. Well, I've done I'm not as bad as other people, I'm not a murderer, I love people, I'm a good person, so yeah, I should get into heaven. What are you talking about? Getting into heaven means you're getting into the perfect presence of God, complete holiness, complete separation from all sin, evil, and everything else. And you think that just being somewhat good, doing some good things, it gains entrance into that? It doesn't make any sense. Like, how low of a view of God do you really have if you think that's what it is? You talk to some people, even some well-meaning Christians, and you're like, you got a low view of God if you think that anything you do is like, earning the love of God. Like, oh, God really loves me now because, I went to church every Sunday. I never missed a Sunday. Oh, so that equals the love of God? God loves you. You should go to church every Sunday. Yeah, you should. You should be there all the time. But that's because you love God, not because you're trying to earn God's love. Because you can't do it. You failed already. Everything you do is tainted by sin, too. So it's like a filthy rag. Here's your rag, but it's all dirty. It's like, thanks. It's not something that's good, So, when you think rightly about that, when you think correctly about our righteous deeds, now God calls them righteous and He honors the things that we do, right? He does do that. He does honor the good things that we do. But to think that that earns anything, no. That does not earn it. God honors it because He loves us, He's merciful, and He's gracious. Not because anything we've done earned it. So it's not because you did that, oh, then I'm going to give you that. Because that was a good thing, because I like that. No, it's like, if God honors our worship of Him, it's only because God is gracious and merciful. Not because what we've done earns it. So, we got to remember that. Everything we do, the best good thing you've done, if it's honored in heaven, it's only because of grace and mercy. That's it. And the love of God. It's not because it earns that. It does not equal that. God's love does not equate to anything that we can do. It's as simple as that. So think about that as you look at your own life and you look at, just how you view like your own personal Bible study, your prayer life and things like that. If you're trying to do those things because you're trying to earn the love of God, then you've already set yourself up to fail. People are like, and you're just going to feel bad about your prayer life all the time. You're going to feel bad about it. It may not be where you think it should be, or where it could be, or where it probably needs to be. But, our prayer life should not be a source of guilt and shame, and which is often how we approach it in the church. Like, your prayer life doesn't equal God's love. It doesn't earn God's love. It's a response of your love for God. Now, if it's weak and stuff like that, then yeah, okay, I need to learn how to love God more. And that should, push us forward. It should not destroy us. It should not make us feel guilty. It should be like, wow, I love God, but look at my prayer life. It's showing that my love is really weak. So, man, I need to do better. How can I love God more? How can I learn more about God so there's more things about God I can love? We can't let it destroy us, because that's what Satan wants to do, right? He wants to say, well, look at your prayer life. You forgot to pray last night before you went to go to bed, so you're a horrible person. No, you forgot. Your love is fickle. It changes. That's how we are as people. But that should be like, oh yeah, man, I forgot to do that. I really need to do that, man. How can I love God more? It should be like an exciting thing. Like, okay, here's my weaknesses. Now, how do I press into the strength of God? So it's a different way to look at things, and it's not listening to, listening to the enemy over there telling you this to give up, because that's what he'd want you to do. It's like, man, that should impel us to do better, to go farther into God's love, and to experience new things that we've never experienced before. So think on those things this week, and come back next time for our last lesson here, and we'll wrap everything up.